Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Spotlight with Sandalina, and I'm your talk show host, Sandalina Satar. Today's guest is Slesha, who is a South Asian model as seen on Good Morning America, CoverGirl, and Vogue. Thank you so much for joining today.
Thank you for having me.
So I had initially seen Slesha on social media and heard of her through mutuals because she is a very well-known model in the South Asian creator community in New York City. And I followed her on a whim on Instagram in the fall of 2023. And miraculously, she followed back and I started fangirling. And then a few days later, actually, I was backstage at South Asian New York Fashion Week helping out. And I ran into her and saw this in this beautiful green outfit, which was so stunning, and also the one that was featured on Good Morning America. And I went up to her and I was like, hi, like, you probably don't know me, but we follow each other on social media. We instantly clicked. She is like so electric and positive and warm and down to earth. And I literally have like a girl crush on her. I'm saying this as she's right here. And and then we DM'd afterwards, and I mentioned, I was doing this talk show and I really wanted to bring her on because she has such an amazing breadth of experiences and insight to share from her time in the modeling world, but outside of that too. Thank you so much again for being here. It's an honor and a privilege.
I'm so excited this is happening. I'm really, really grateful to be sitting here with you.
Thank you. So everybody knows you as the model. You are one of the most known models in the space. And aside from all of that, I want to know a little bit more about the beginnings of who you are. So tell me a little bit more about your family history and leading us up into your upbringing.
Yeah, for sure. So I am a Kansas girl through and through. I was born there, brought up there. I stayed in the Kansas City area through college. I didn't leave until I got my master's. My dad's family has been in the States for a very long time. My grandpa was actually one of the first Indians in Kansas.
Wow.
So there's a long history of my family being there. My dad, actually, his whole family are refugees from Burma. So,
Wow.
like, they fled overnight. My dad's had a tremendous upbringing, very complicated and tumultuous sort of upbringing, but he made it. He's a doctor, very comfortable in Kansas now. My mom, she has roots in Kenya, but she was born and brought up in India. And she was actually like a dancer growing up. So she actually has a little bit of creative in her too. She was a part of a really big dance company. She was a background dancer in movies, and she was on a student visa in the States and was like, well, I don't know if I want to go back. I'm really liking it here. And so she got married.
As one does.
And then I came around about a year later. And I have a little brother, and I grew up in the same household as my grandparents, which I'm sure some other South Asians can relate to in the space as well.
I actually don't know if I know anybody else from Kansas. What was it like demographically? What was your exposure to wealth growing up?
Yeah, for sure. So the community in Kansas that I grew up with was predominantly white. So who I went to school with and stuff like that, I was the diversity. There were summer camps and classes that happened at my school. And I remember one girl asking me, so are you Black, or, what are you? Like, they really just didn't have any exposure to Indians.
Right.
And my grandpa always looked at it as like a really unique responsibility to be able to show people like what brown people could and should be. Like, we can have really great culture. We have really great food. We can have our roots and still stay true to who we are, but still like blend into the Western components to like have a life in Kansas. So I feel like I was kind of raised in this like beautiful blend of both. And I got really lucky because I was on a dance team starting at age 9.
What kind of dance did you do?
Indian dance. So it was Gujarati folk dance. We actually did Garba. So it was the competitive Garba world. It's called Fogana.
Okay.
And I grew up in that space. I'd never danced before that, but I got thrown onto this team, and I basically gained 10 sisters through that experience.
That's beautiful.
And at the time I was super awkward. I was pretty ugly. I
No.
wasn't particularly
I don't believe
popular
that.
at school. Like, it was rough, but those girls really helped me see value in myself. I think had I not had those girls, like, I probably would have really struggled with self-esteem growing up.
Fair.
They told me that, it's okay to not really know how you fit in, in a place like Kansas, but they were always there having my back. I was one of the youngest, so it was nice to have people to look up to and kind of see beautiful examples of like somebody that is blended East and West. So I was really lucky with that. I think like my dad coming from literally poverty, like he was malnourished, and you can see that when you look at him today. Like, if you were to see my dad, you'd be like, yeah, this man didn't really have food growing up. You could tell he didn't have access to clothing. They lost everything when they fled Burma, and they ended up in South India. in Hyderabad, actually.
Okay.
My dad actually got a really killer scholarship, and that's what allowed him to really go and have some sort of education.
Yeah.
And I think he knew he didn't really have much of a choice. Like, he knew that if he wanted to survive, he knew that if he wanted to get out of his current situation, there was no other way out other than education.
Yeah.
So he picked the one path that he knew would help him get out in a certain way, you know? And he used his medical education to apply to residencies in the States. And that's how he was able to kind of turn his life around.
Okay.
So I've always sort of grown up with that. And he obviously had nothing growing up. So you're starting at basically zero. He always talks about how in India or in South Asia or any of those parts, when you have nothing, you truly have nothing. Poverty here in America, US, is a little bit different. Like, you still have something.
Yeah.
You know, but there it's very different. You truly have nothing. And so he knows what that's like. And so I think my brother and I kind of always grew up with some of those more complicated experiences with understanding money. And actually, it's so complicated that Pooja Shah actually interviewed me for an article in Teen Vogue about intergenerational trauma. And the money section is about my brother and I's, like, experiences, like, on like how our relationship with money is incredibly complicated, because my dad started out with nothing. He raised us with some of those kind of concepts, but we had money, and my dad became more and more successful, and my mom had a job too. So over the years, like, we became more and more comfortable. I never felt that, like, we were in a bad situation.
Right.
I never once felt that way. Like, in my eyes, like, my parents had me doing all the activities. So clearly, like, they were working very hard, and they allocated all the resources to my brother and I's upbringing. I remember when I started at my school, the private school that I went to, the first thing that anyone said to my parents is, how can you afford to send your daughter here?
Oh.
It was like a very kind of toxic situation that they were putting me into. But my dad had gone through so much with, like, just trying to get an education to get him to where he was, that he knew that all that mattered was, like, as long as I could survive it, it was worth it to put his child through that kind of stress and kind of toxic culture.
If you could net the positives and the negative of your relationship with money, at least growing up, maybe it's different now, would you say that your relationship with money was more positive or more negative? And if so, why?
I think that, like, it really taught me to, like, use resources wisely. And I think that's super positive. Like, if you could get a lemon for a certain amount of money at Target, but you could get it cheaper at Aldi, maybe you should get it cheaper at Aldi.
Yeah, no, you know, that makes sense.
I'm willing to take the walk a little bit farther to go to Aldi if I need to. So I think, like, just understanding how to spend money wisely, understanding the value of money. I think, like, we always learn that if you want something for fun, then you have to work for it. Yeah. And so I think that I always grew up with that mentality of, like, hard work correlates directly to what you can and can't have. Yeah. So I think it was overall, like, a positive lesson. I've never, like, resented that in any way. I think that's been an important lesson.
And I think that's a really beautiful thing, because a lot of us, we have these upbringings, and when we get to be the second generation that gets to live out our American dream, with a lot more privilege and access to resources than our parents had, we still have a frugal mindset, which I think is what helps set us up for success in the long run. It's very easy. I think there's a Chinese proverb that says that wealth only lasts 3 generations. Wow. Because, you know, you gain it, and then by the 3rd generation, the kids just have no value or sense of money, and then it all goes down the drain. Oh, wow. So we get to be the first or second, depending on the situation, generation that has access to that resources and that wealth. But I think frugality and really thinking about kind of making those lifestyle choices to optimize on saving is huge. And I think that hopefully as we all grow up and go through our adulthood, we'll see the product of that. Yeah. Hopefully, because I think in the Western world, there's a very big emphasis on consumerism and spending just to spend and just to show off. And I think that's what I admire a lot about South Asian culture is there's not as much that. Yeah. I love that. It's not as, like, ostentatious and showy. And I kind of grew up in that school culture where it was a little bit ostentatious. So tell me a little bit more about that. Yeah, the culture at your schools. My school is a private school. The wealthiest students in kind of that area tend to go there because the tuition fees are exorbitant. Most of the kids are living in a neighborhood called Mission Hills, which is actually the Beverly Hills of the Midwest. So there used to be, like, actual buses that would take you through all the houses because, like, the architecture was so beautiful, and it's, like, where all the rich people lived. So it was kind of a different world, and I think people thought if you didn't live there, then you truly had nothing. And I mean, we were fine. Like, we had a house, a roof over our head. I was eating well. Like,
nothing compared to what my dad went through. But there was always that kind of perception that like Slesha has nothing. And I remember my 17th birthday party, my husband actually threw a surprise birthday party for me, and he kind of worked with my two best Indian friends to kind of plan this thing.
Yeah.
They found a way to invite my friends in high school, and it was the scariest thing for me as a 17-year-old, because first of all, I don't really love surprises. Second of all, it was like my two worlds clashing. Like, it was like all my Indian friends that I loved so dearly that really helped me become the person I am and gave me any sense of self-esteem that I had, plus the students that I went to school with.
Yeah.
And so it was like kind of a crazy mashup. It was two worlds colliding, and I didn't exactly know how to process it or how to be. Not to say that I'm two different people with different groups, but I do think I have a very versatile personality that can get along with, if you're like 3 years old, I can be your friend, and if you're 80 years old, I can be your friend. Like, I'm not one of those people that like, I think I can only have one type of friend. Yeah. So my closest friends are really, really old. They're like, you know, grandparents.
Yeah. I love
That's just like who I am.
That's so sweet.
So for me to have two completely different worlds colliding was very, very scary. And I say all this to say that my school friends turned to each other, and I remember them saying this. They were like, Slesha's rich? And I was like, I wouldn't call myself rich, but we did have like a really nice house at that point. You know, they just didn't know that it existed because it was so far away from where everybody else lived. I mean, it was like a 35 to 40 minute drive. School's also on the Missouri side of the border too, because like state line divides Kansas and Missouri. So like you would park, and the tennis courts were like on the Kansas side if you were a senior. Yeah. And then the school is mostly on the Missouri side. So it's listed as Missouri school.
No, you don't hear that every day. I crossed over a state border to go to school every day.
It's technically illegal for me to like park when I was like 16 years old driving my car. Like, technically it wasn't allowed. I think like it was surprising to my school friends to kind of see that I wasn't as like uncomfortable as maybe they thought I was.
Yeah. I want to hear a little bit more about being one of the only people of color in that sort of environment. How do you think that impacted your psyche and perception of self and self-esteem? I know you touched on it a little bit, but just more to go more in depth.
I think I felt just like I was sticking out like a sore thumb. Like, I felt like I was under a microscope. Like, I was automatically looked at because I was different. Yeah. I felt like the expectations were higher of me academically. Like, I think there was a bias. Like, if teachers saw my name on a paper, like, but there were definitely some racist teachers there that would be like, you know, I'm going to mark them down. I know of one teacher who literally would never give an Indian an A. And so if you had that teacher on your list, you knew that like your chances of like getting top 10, top 20 or anything like that, or getting into a good school.
That's awful.
Is going to be hard because you're going to automatically have like a B on your, or lower. But everybody would always try to switch out of him if you were any kind of color.
Jeez, that's awful.
Craziness.
That is so awful.
But yeah, I think there was like a little bit of bias. Like, they expect more out of you somehow.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think it to be the
that
golden.
was tougher.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the other South Asians I went to school with, like the ones that were there, were like all absolutely brilliant. And I'm still friends with all of them. Yeah. They're all insanely smart and talented and successful people in their own rights. And so I think that also makes it hard. Yeah. Because you're compared against them, even though we're all different people all together, you know?
And what was your parents' parenting philosophy with you growing up? Were they erring on the side of being more conservative? Were they more progressive? What was their kind of philosophy?
I think like as long as like we were working really hard and we were well-rounded and we were kind of like meeting their expectations for what they felt like we need to set ourselves up for success, like they were very, very open with us. I wasn't ever like kind of sheltered or harbored in any way, which I thought was really cool. Like, I was varsity cheer captain in high school.
Oh my God, wait, so was I.
Stop. And I think my personality is what got me to captain. It wasn't because I was the best on the team.
I also feel the exact same way. I feel like I was like the personality cheer captain because my co-captain, she was like very talented. I'm a horrible dancer. Like, I literally, a funny story. So I actually used to be a flyer like you. Mm-hmm. And then I actually was in a rally in front of half of my entire high school. It's like 1,000 people. And I plummeted straight to the ground. So the whole school. Oh, no. The whole school saw that. So all that to say that I was not the skilled captain. I was just, I was a personality hire.
Personality hire. Yeah.
I was like, okay, like
it's all personality.
It's organizational management. Like, that's all you need to be captain in my books. But if you need somebody to actually, but yeah, so I think there's a lot of relatability there. That's what I love. It's like we're all on these trajectories. It's a cheer captain thing. You wouldn't get. Yeah. Oh my God. You know the song "You Belong with Me"? Yes. That song's so funny because I used to play the clarinet in middle school.
Oh my God, I did
would
too.
Be like, wait, what? Are you serious?
I
Okay.
played the clarinet.
That's so funny. That's so I used to listen to that song in middle school, and then I'd be like, oh, like, I'm on the bleachers. Like, you know, like, she's straight captain. I was like, oh, I'm on the bleachers. And then in high school, I was like, well, not until senior year. But I was like, yeah, like, I'm on the other side of that lyric now, Taylor. Thank
my
you.
God.
What were your dreams as a kid? What did you want to be when you
I
were gonna
always
grow up?
wanted to be a doctor. And I
Okay.
think it's because of watching my dad, but pretty much everyone on my dad's side of the family is a doctor. It almost like, it's not that anybody said you have to be a doctor, but it's just something that a lot of people in my
Yeah.
family have done. My dad always says that what I'm doing right now with my life is the second wave of the American dream. It takes a tremendous amount of privilege as a parent for your kid to be able to do whatever they want to do. I will say that I paid my dues. I worked for several years.
Yeah.
I have my master's degree. I worked at Johns Hopkins for a few years. Then I worked in fashion for a few years. And so I made enough money to give myself the runway to be able to kind of pursue what I'm doing now full time.
No, and I love what you said, because those exact words verbatim that you just mentioned about the second wave, that is the premise of this entire show.
Oh
that
my
is the
God,
name
I
of the
love
introductory
that.
episode, the second generation's American dream. So it resonates so strongly, and I love that, and it is a privilege. But I like what you said about paying your dues. So I don't know if you feel this way, and I think this is a common feeling amongst a lot of children of immigrants, but I feel a lot of immigrant child guilt. It feels like we have access to all this privilege and all these resources that our parents didn't have the luxury of having growing up. They had to build themselves from the ground up. And I think recently I actually left my investment banking job. I remember talking to my dad on the phone, and I was like, I just feel so guilty that I can do this, that if he wanted to leave a job in his 20s because he was miserable, he wouldn't have had that option, but I do. And I would say, how unfair is it that I get to metaphorically frolic through fields of daisies and prance around New York City and do whatever I want?
Living your best life.
Yeah, exactly. Well, they had to put in so much effort to just make it in America.
Right.
And one thing that he said was, well, that was the point. Point of us struggling isn't so that our kids can continue to struggle. The point is so that our kids don't have to struggle. The access to privilege and freedom of choice, that's what they came to this country for.
It's such a hard pill to swallow, though, because it's like, why you? Why did you have to go through that? Let me bear some of that.
Exactly, exactly.
And I think that gets tough.
So you wanted to be a doctor.
Yes.
At some point. So tell me a little bit about the realization that maybe that wasn't the path that you were destined for.
Oh my gosh, I love this question because I think it can happen to anybody. Like, once I was in medical school, I had the white coat, I was in the classes.
Yeah.
I can't think of really looking back on it anything that I actually liked about it. And that's really scary. And that was a really tough pill to swallow, because when you start medical school in a 6-year program at 18, you've basically spent all of middle school trying to like prepare yourself for what is to come in high school. Because when you're in high school, you're essentially doing what is expected of you to get into medical school.
Okay.
Which most people would be doing in college, right? They'd be doing shadowing, they'd be doing volunteering, they'd be like, you know, doing all the prereq kind of classes. Like, they're really preparing themselves to dive into the deep end.
Yeah.
And be ready, be patient forward ready. You know, you're interviewing patients right off the bat. It got to the point where like my body was actively telling me no. We would have to go into a patient room to interview a patient, and I would just get dizzy and nauseous, and I'd have to sit down. And it just got to a point where literally my body was saying no, but I was also kind of going through a lot of mental health issues at the time with I think this had a big part of it, like realizing that what I wanted maybe wasn't what I wanted. Yeah. Shattering my whole reality of what I thought my future was going to look like. For me, I knew that I wanted to go into more education because I wanted to be a doctor. So in my head, there was a clear plan. Yeah. And suddenly there's no clear plan. You're there, and it's scary.
It's very daunting. It is very daunting. And I feel very similarly. I feel like I'd spent my whole life working up to investment banking. And then when I was actually doing the job similar to you, I was like, I can't say a single thing I like about this. Like, this is so, and
it's a brutal job.
It is a brutal job, but working yourself up to being a doctor is not easy either. I mean, it's a very brutal process you go through to get there. And I think that my breaking point was also when I started having physical reactions to being in the office and stressful environments, like health repercussions. And I was like, this is literally my body telling me no.
Yeah, that you need to put in that resignation and find something else now.
Exactly. And I think that our body is always talking to us. Like, we know what feels good and what doesn't. It's just a matter of listening and working with your body.
Right.
You made the decision, which I'm sure was very difficult, right? And then what kind of came after that?
Yeah, for sure. So I got really lucky because my dad never wanted me to be a doctor. He was a doctor, but he didn't want me to be a doctor.
Why is that, actually?
He didn't think it was the right path. Like, he sits on a lot of boards, and he happens to also advise like senators in DC. And so he had a
Okay.
really like kind of bird's eye view on the healthcare industry, what the trends were going to be, really understanding forecasting how things were going to go, what salaries were going to look like.
Yeah.
And he's like, it's not the same as when I did it. Like, it's just going to get worse and worse. And I think we're starting to see that now. And so had I continued on that path, like, it wouldn't have been anywhere close to what I had dreamt of it being
Yeah.
like. And what I dreamt of it being like was like very similar to what my dad did in his career. Like, he had a lot of administrative roles. He was, obviously he had his own clinical practice. He was, working at a hospital. He was doing long-term care. He was in
Okay.
nursing homes. Like, he did so many different jobs within just being a doctor. Like, there's so much you can do with a medical degree.
Yeah.
And so I just thought, wow, like, what a versatile degree. Like, you can do so much with it. I didn't know anyone else in any other career. So for me, like, that was my worldview. Like, I really thought like I was going to be a doctor. And so when
Yeah.
I suddenly realized that it wasn't the right path for me, it got me thinking, well, what am I resonating with? What do I like? And it was at that time that my parents told me that we have a really close family friend in Kansas City. And he actually told my parents, like, he's like, being a doctor is just a huge waste of that girl's talent. And I'm so lucky that he took the time and the trouble of telling my parents how he really felt about me going to med school.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that my parents took the time and energy to tell me that, because
Yeah.
it could have been like, stop.
And the
at
fact
any
they
one of the
listened.
doors. Yeah,
They listened to him. They
and
took
they
it
agreed
seriously.
with him.
Yeah.
And they were like, there's something else here. Like, you're gifted in a lot of different things, but you have to figure out what you like. Because I learned from growing up that you can be really good at the violin, but you can still really hate it.
Yeah.
When I started to shift, I told myself, like, look, you can be good at things, but that doesn't mean that that's the right path for you.
Yeah.
You really have to follow your heart and see, like, what is sparking your interest. And so I took baby steps towards that for the next, like, decade of my life.
Right.
So immediately, like, from that point on, 2011 was when I got my white coat, and I started in the fall
Okay.
of the 6-year med program. And then I noticed that I was always more interested in what was going around me as
Okay.
opposed to in the patient rooms. Like, I couldn't have
Okay.
cared less what was going on in the patient rooms. Like, how does everyone know where to go? There are so many different roles in the healthcare system. What is everyone else doing? Because I
Right.
knew nothing about that. So I had this itch, and I was talking to the dean at the time.
Okay.
He recommended I get an MHA. My dad also happened to be the CMO of a hospital at the time, and so he was also talking to the CEO. CEO said the same thing, like, maybe consider a master's of healthcare administration.
Okay.
So took a leave, went and did my master's, had the option of, like, obviously going back to med school and going down that whole pathway again, but obviously that wasn't something that I was super keen on, because my body was just reacting so negatively, and I didn't really
Yeah.
understand what that feeling was, but it was like my body was saying no means no, and I didn't quite understand that at the time. So there was always that door open for me. Like, there's
Right.
always a backup plan, if you will. It wasn't the right backup plan. Thankfully, I never went down
But
that
it's a
path
step
again.
closer. Yeah.
But it's a step closer. So I actually really loved health administration. I worked at Hopkins for a few years. I was living my best life. I had a phenomenal mentor. Her name is Dr. Sharita Golden, Executive Vice Chair of the Department of Medicine at Hopkins.
Okay.
Today, oh my goodness, she is the Chief Diversity Officer and Vice President of the entire Hopkins Institution.
Wow.
Like, and she's
Okay.
a Black woman.
Wow.
And she is fierce, and she has the best outfits.
How lovely.
She's a fashionista, and I'm positive that she too was cheer captain, because she has that.
She must have been.
She has that energy. She was amazing. And she said, Slesha, whatever it is in life that bothers you, you need to, like, try to use that to kind of help guide your career. And it's okay for many things in life to bother you and for you
Yeah.
to follow that itch. But that's the best advice I can give you, is find what bothers you and follow that. And it took me a couple of jobs
Yeah.
to kind of continue to get to that point where I'm getting to now. So after Hopkins, I got a really great job offer in New York to work in fashion.
Okay.
So that's why I moved my life here. That was the first time that Nimish, my now husband, and I lived together. He was at McKinsey & Co.
Okay.
starting after college. So we were always long distance through that whole time. We were long distance for 7.5 years.
Okay.
But that was the
Wow.
first time we were going to move in together. So we moved in together in a little rental, 1-bed Manhattan
Yeah.
apartment. It was so much fun living with him, and we had, like, a really cool life, because he would travel for 4 days, and during those 4 days that he was gone, I was, like, immersed in the fashion world. I was doing all things business related,
Yeah.
and I feel like I'm lighting up right now because I loved that world. Like,
Yeah.
it was so much fun to, like, do a little bit of everything. I was working for like an LLC that had multiple labels underneath it. And basically I was the only non-creative on the team. So that meant like I wasn't doing any design or anything like that. But I was really like knee deep in like operations, strategy, marketing, PR kind of related stuff, like just overall how the organization was constructed. Really, really fun stuff. I really enjoyed it. During that time, ironically, I was working with our marketing team to kind of develop what the campaigns would look like. I was working with the design team to see what was coming up, how to really position this collection well. I was the one who was like planning our photo shoots, hiring talent, conducting the castings, conducting the shoots. I was actually lookbook model at the time too. Like I was an e-com model as well. So I was like in it as well, but like I didn't want to be like, there was like a vision that I had and I needed other models to be able to enact that. I needed male models, and it was such a fun experience being on the client side. Because I got scouted when I was 16. So I'd always been modeling. It was always like a small kind of opportunistic kind of thing that I did. I just thought it was another one of my activities, just like violin or cheer or dance or field hockey or anything like that. Between med school and when I went to master's, I had like a short break before like the master's program started. So I went to a big international competition. There were about 1,000 models. I ended up winning the whole thing. My first time really seeing like, okay, like I could actually probably work in a lot of different markets, because like the callbacks that you get and like the interviews that you get kind of help you understand what agencies might be interested in you. And we realized that I had like won the overall title. I also won like most fashionable, I think. And then I got more callbacks than any other talent. I knew that there was something there, but also
doesn't
like
just happen for no reason.
It was like, I can either be a model or I can go to Hopkins and get my master's degree. And because I had like shaken my earth core, you know, realizing that med school wasn't going to be my path, like it felt crazy to not continue on with my master's program.
Makes sense.
So that's the way I ended up going. But I think like it goes back to destiny. Like no matter what you're doing, like that bumper is going to push you back in the right direction. And I think like I was always meant to pursue modeling full time. And I think I'm doing what I'm supposed to do right now.
Tell me a little bit more about how you transitioned from working at the fashion brand to modeling full time.
So I was able to sell my shares. And with that, I had a little bit of runway. And so it was like, okay, what do we do with the runway? So my husband and I decided to buy a place in Manhattan.
And what year was this now?
So I exited the brand in 2021.
Okay. This is more recent. Past couple years.
More recent. Yeah. So actually December of 2021 is when I decided to like actually take modeling seriously. And try to go full time. So what I did was I applied to my mother agency. So my interview was early December. And that same day I got a contract. I signed it the next day.
Oh, wow.
Q2 of 2022 is when I signed with my New York agency and my Midwest agency. I'm almost up to 2 years on those.
Before we go into the modeling worlds and you know, kind of the ups and downs of that, I wanted to ask a little bit more about your mental health journey all the way through some of what you've just told us.
For sure. So I would say that like I started having kind of depressive symptoms when I was a teen, actually. I had a lot of issues like with like health in my family, and so that didn't really help. I was one of my grandpa's like caretakers in his final days. At the same time, I had mono. My mom had tuberculosis, actually. It was crazy. And actually, a part of the reason I even chose the 6-year med program at UMKC was because it was close to home. It was down the street from high school, and I was still able to like pick up my brother, drop him off, and do those kinds of things to help my family while we kind of like resettled into like a new reality. And while my mom was still recovering, of course. So it was kind of a really rough time. Also aligning that with like my understanding that, you know, being a doctor is not actually what I want in life. All of that together compounding really took me into a really dark space. And that's when I started kind of questioning my existence. That's really when that started. And then on and off from there, like things got better, obviously, right? Like I'm, you know, shifting my life, like I'm pursuing a master's degree. Then I got a great job at Hopkins, working in fashion, like all those things were very exciting. But at the same time, like I still always had these like what we would call waves of sadness. Where like those symptoms would come on so strong, but they always went away. And it wasn't until the beginning of 2020 that they came on so strong that I ended up in a hospital. My family and I were like, okay, this is serious. Like, this isn't just like a wave of sadness. Let's figure this out. And I'm really lucky that I've always been really close with my family. Like my brother's my best friend. My mom and I are super close. I've had a great relationship with my dad. Obviously, my grandparents lived with me growing up. My grandma and I like used to share a room together. We're super
Right.
close. By that point, Nimish and I had been together for eons. So
Yeah.
he had all the context in the world. He started dating me before actually my first symptom ever came to be.
Okay.
So he's seen me before and after and through all of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was really lucky to have a lot of people with enough context and who cared about me deeply enough to like really help me be my support system through my recovery. And honestly, like it's been such a long journey to where I am, but I smile because like I'm really excited about how like far I've come. And I think like that's truthfully like how I define success now. It's survival. It's like just being alive. I'm grateful for it. Just being alive is a really big deal. And then on top of that, if I can have like even an ounce of happiness, any joy that comes from anything, that's really powerful.
Yeah.
And I'll never take that for granted ever again.
That is such a beautiful perspective. I mean, it's so easy and it's so fair if you go through something like that to come out and kind of, see the world as this awful deck of cards you've been dealt. And I think the fact that you were able to come out of that and have such a positive perspective on life is so commendable. Like that's incredible. It's such a beautiful thing. I would have never, I mean, that's the thing about mental health. It's a well-concealed monster, right? So you just never know.
You don't know.
You just can't.
There was nothing in my life that was so bad. Like I had a great family, like I wasn't like struggling to survive on the streets. Like there was no reason why that should have hit me so hard, but it comes out of nowhere. You don't really like it's truthfully scientifically a chemical imbalance. Like that's really what it can be, and so there's no shame in it.
No, of course not. And were you, so it sounds like, if I'm reading this correctly, you're in a better place now in the present.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think that's kind of why I'm so willing and open to talk about it, because I'm not in the thick of it. It's so easy for me to now be like really reflective of it and to talk about like the specific little things that I do to kind of get through any tough moment.
Yeah.
And like how I can get through the day and how I can push through anything. And there's really nothing that rattles me up or shakes me up anymore. And I think a lot of it also comes from like the positivity of the modeling industry as well, like as a job. It really focuses me on like being my best self every single day, being holistically healthy internally and externally. And I think I'm really grateful to be in a job that kind of helps me bring out the best of myself.
Yeah.
And so I think everything just sort of goes together for me right now.
That's actually a really interesting point. To me, it feels counterintuitive because I've always heard so many negative things about the modeling industry. So I want to understand, have there been negative moments that maybe dragged you down too, do you think? Or
I think like there are a lot of misconceptions about what the industry can be like. Really early on, I had an agent tell me like, physically, like for your appearance, be who you are and we will make the rest work. And I think like that is the case today. Like you see models of all shapes and sizes, and it's okay if your measurements fluctuate. I think there are certain categories of the modeling industry that you do need to be more careful of your physical measurements and like your physical body. One of those is runway, but also not really anymore. Like I think there is like a caliber, diversity. But like there are 5'5" girls that have walked for Dior. One of them is a South Asian girl.
Wow.
Like,
Actually,
that happened in India, so it's not like impossible. It's not unheard of. There's a girl who's signed with my mother agency, and her name is Brianna Wright. She's technically listed as a curve model at Ford Model. She's walked for tons of huge designers. Like she's just amazing. And so like there's really nothing that's like limiting you in the runway world. Like some designers talk about it openly. They're like, we have an assortment of garments, and like garments are constructed to be able to hold like a certain range of measurements. Some garments are like, loose at the bottom, so it doesn't matter what your hips are. Some are bigger at the top, so it doesn't matter what your bust looks like. Yeah. Like there are garments that are, very flexible for all sorts of different types of shapes. And sure, some like, let's say you have a corseted dress or something that's very specific, very tailored, then perhaps like a model with the measurements that the garment was constructed for would be more helpful. But it's very flexible these days. And I think the other category is actually fit production. I personally am a fit production model as well.
Okay, so what does that entail specifically?
A lot of people think fit production is like fitness. And like I am also a signed fitness model, but that's not what it is. Fit production is actually, to me, the coolest part about modeling. It's my bread and butter throughout the year when there's not huge campaigns and bookings happening.
Yeah.
As companies produce clothing, oftentimes they run their sample garments through a fit production model before sending it to the factory and saying, let's produce thousands of these units.
Okay.
So the fit production model will put on the garment, and we're trained a little bit in pattern making, but also in like fit, feel, like what things get returned, like how the consumer might be interacting with the garment.
Okay.
So for example, if I were to be fit productioning for a large brand, I would help them decide like, is this going to get returned, or what can we do to improve the fit, the feel, or the function?
So it's like product management, sort of, before clothes, more so, before it reaches the consumer.
It's really cool. We I think, as fit production models, prevent things from getting into a landfill.
Okay.
It's a big role in sustainability, and so I think like
I like that.
as a brand, whether you are small or large, I would strongly considering hiring a fit production model. And they come in all shapes and sizes too. Like, you know, whatever you're trying to produce. So let's say like you have a line that's specifically for petite girls.
Yeah.
Then you can hire a petite fit production model. Let's say you want to create garments for men. There are male fit production models. Okay. There's a model for everything you want to do. So like I have some really great whale clients that produce thousands and thousands of units, and they will literally put every single sample on me, and I will make corrections, and sometimes we will get another sample made before I say like, yeah, I think this is going to be good. Yeah. And like the biggest compliment I can get is when like something flies off the rack and they like start producing it in another color because like it fits really well and I made like really meaningful changes. And then you see like the comments that people leave in their reviews, and it's like, wow, this fits so well. It just feels really good knowing that they didn't have to take this to a tailor. They're not going to return it. This is quickly going to become one of their favorite pieces in their closet. Yeah. But because companies are relying on me to know, like, to be able to fit these garments, my measurements can't change too much. If they do, they have to be within spec of a certain amount, and I have to know where it falls. So I've had clients hire me and be like, look, like we're actually creating garments for juniors that are slightly smaller than you, so a slightly smaller hip or like a slightly smaller bust. Yeah. And it's up to me to know how the pattern changes and how I will fill the garment differently than their ideal customer.
So it seems like the modeling industry has propelled you forward in life in a lot of positive ways, and it feels like a lot of the negative aspects that can oftentimes and rightfully get people down, it feels like you've been able to rise above that and focus more on the positives. And I want to ask you, do you think that that's a function of the point that you are in your life and the wisdom that you've had and the experiences that you've had thus far as doing this, as I guess you would start when you're in your late 20s at that point?
Technically, yeah. I was, I think, 28 that year, 29. I don't know. I'd have to do the math.
So, but I guess the question is, do you think that if you started modeling full time in your early 20s, do you think that you'd have a different answer for that earlier question?
I think yes, but also because I think that my client side work in fashion really informed what makes a model great. Okay. What is a model's role truly on set? And with that understanding, I've realized that modeling is not about the model at all. It's not about you. And the sooner you can realize that, the less like pain you'll have. You're always the last to be chosen on set. There's nothing wrong with that. They're creating a whole team and a whole, like, everybody is on set for a specific reason. They're going to bring the best for that role. Right. So, like, they're going to bring the best hair person for that role, the best makeup person for that role, the best photo video people for that role. Yeah. The best set designers, whatever you need, they're going to bring the best for that role. And then the model is going to kind of be that final piece that kind of ties everything together. Right. And so the sooner you realize that you're a part of a team and it's not all about you and it's not about your, like, the way you look and all those kinds of things. Like, it's about, like, a brand story, and it's about delivering as many usable and strong shots that the marketing team can then use and create into different assets to help sell a garment. There's so much beauty in that art and in that craft that, like, once you remove yourself from that, of like, oh, it's got to be me, I have to look great, like my eye makeup isn't what I want it to be, like, oh, I don't like this style. It's not about you. Like, it's like, I think that, like, the world is beautiful because we all like different things. Yeah. right? Like we all aren't trying to become a doctor. We're all not trying to go to investment banking.
Yeah.
What someone finds beautiful, like somebody else might find hideous.
Yeah.
Like I love the example of Tyra Banks. Like the first time she shot with a really big French photographer, he was like, "You're literally the ugliest girl I've ever seen."
Wow.
Tyra Banks at that age was like, I mean, even now she's an unreal beauty to me.
Yeah.
But to him, he was like, what am I doing here?
Oh my God.
You know? So like, I think that lesson just is so freeing.
Yeah.
And I think that I've started to not take myself seriously. Like I will walk out the door with an acne pimple patch if I need to. I don't really get acne much anymore. I'm really blessed with a phenomenal dermatologist, but like if I ever did, like I don't take myself seriously anymore. Like you could put me in anything, you could dress me up any which way, and I'll find myself within it.
I love that.
And I think that's really cool.
I love that. You've had a lot of really big moments in your modeling career thus far.
Thank you for saying that.
Of course. I love seeing the stuff that you do on your social media. And I wanted to ask, what have been kind of your key highlight moments and moments where you were like, I can't believe that just happened?
Oh my gosh. Harper's Bazaar, I was in print, which is really rare. Like a lot of magazines don't print.
Yeah.
You know? And the fact that, like, if you opened Harper's Bazaar Vietnam, of all countries, if you opened that page, like, there would have been a giant picture of me, and it said Slesha Patel and a bunch of words in Vietnamese.
Wow.
Like, I'm like, what? And then one of my friends that lives in the Bay Area, she actually was headed to Vietnam for work.
Okay.
She went up to the newsstand and bought all the Harper's Bazaar issues that they had and brought them back for me.
That's so sweet.
So, like, that was, like, the first, like, whoa. And then I thought, you know, maybe it's fluke, like maybe that won't happen again. And then Vogue happened.
Yeah.
And I remember like shaking in my boots at that shoot. And I don't know if the photographer or the stylist or the hair and makeup people are going to watch this, but like they are in another league. An utter shock that they wanted me to be a part of that.
I'm not shocked at all. Not that I know much about the modeling world, but you're good at what you do.
Thank you. But yeah, when that came out, I was like,
you're like, that's me in Vogue.
Like, I had agents tell me that would never happen, but that's because the industry is changing so rapidly.
Yeah.
Like even 2 to 3 years ago when I started, things have changed tremendously.
Yeah.
It's just a really beautiful thing to continue to see it evolve. I think we're going to see some really exciting things, and the entire landscape's going to be different in the next 10 years.
I'm so excited to see where it goes.
It'll be really fun to watch.
Yeah, and I'm excited to support all of you as you go through that.
Thank you.
And I wanted to ask, tell me a little bit more about your experience being on Good Morning America. How was that?
Oh my gosh, that was
you were so cute on there, by the way. I adored watching that.
That was definitely another pinch me moment, because in Kansas, when I would apply for opportunities to be on like the news shows, I actually didn't get it once.
Wow.
Like they have models that are like, here's back to school fashion, here's like homecoming fashion.
Yeah.
I was never selected for those opportunities. So in my head, I was like, okay, like I'm not what like the general public wants to see, like doing those kinds of things. So when the South Asian New York Fashion Week team and Nirja, who's a publicist and has a PR company, and all these people thought that I could be a good fit for that, like I was just like, maybe the industry really is changing, you know, like this is crazy that I got that opportunity. And so they went with 3 models for that opportunity. I was lucky to be one of them. And then out of that, the Good Morning America team had to choose one person out of our team to be in like the in-between clips. Like, you know how like they have like before the commercial break or after the commercial break, they're like, just in a few seconds, you're going to see the woman behind South Asian New York Fashion Week. The fact that like they chose me for every one of those segments, including like the pumpkin spice latte makeup trend segment with Neil Ciabelli, like I was just like, is my life a dream right now?
That's amazing.
Good Morning America is really nice to their models. They send a driver to pick you up at your home.
Oh my gosh, shut up.
So like there's like this car waiting and my doorman is like looking at me. It's like, did you get an Uber Black or something? Like, this is a really nice car. And the guy like opened the door for me and I sat inside. I was like, this is crazy.
Wow.
Super early in the morning, they drove us to the studio. Had the best time, and as soon as we were done with the segment, I literally ran out the door. I ran home, wiped off my makeup, and grabbed my bag, and I went straight to Fashion Week because it was actually Fashion Week. So I was walking 3 shows that day.
Okay.
So I had to go straight to the venue for that, get right back into hair and makeup. So it was a really long day. I don't think I wrapped that day until midnight. So by then, like, I had been up since 4 in the morning because I think like our pickup time's at like 4:30 in the morning or something.
I mean, Good Morning America. You have to beat America.
Yeah.
I guess, and waking up that day.
Yeah, my cousin was in Hawaii and saw it live.
Oh, wow.
So that was crazy that like people all over the country were like getting to see it. And I will always cherish that, especially because my husband was on Good Morning America like 10 years before I was.
Okay.
It was exactly 10 years previous that he was like on Good Morning America. He was on a bunch of news outlets. He was on NPR. He did a TED Talk.
Wow.
He was having his moment back then.
Yeah, and now it's your turn.
Yeah,
and I
so
love
it was like
that.
10 years later, it was my turn. I don't know, maybe in 10 years it'll be like my dog's turn. A girl can dream.
I love that. I want to talk a little bit more about your husband. So it sounds like you guys are a very dynamic duo, like a very power couple, both very accomplished in your respective fields. So tell me more about how you guys met, because you guys met when you were young and you've been together for a very long time
really
now.
Young. So as we kind of touched on before, there weren't a ton of Kansans that were Indians back then.
Right.
And one of my friends from school, he and I used to carpool together. His name is Nilan.
Okay.
And he was in the grade below me, but we shared a lot of classes together. He was very gifted in math. And so even though I was in honors, he was in my honors class.
Okay.
And so we would do like math camps together over the summer. Just so we can kind of like learn all the curriculum before the like year would start. So we did one of those camps for like, I think it was like pre-calculus / trig / calculus. So it was like a 3-week course. And we would carpool every day and we would sit together, and we noticed this guy in class, and this guy would get all the questions right, and he would get them done first before anyone else in class, which was odd because Nilan was the best at math. That was Nilan usually.
Okay.
So he immediately caught our eye, and so Nilan was like, let's just go talk to him. Let's just go like meet him and see who he is, because like we've never seen this kid before. Like, is he new to town? Like, where did he move from? Like, let's go figure him out. I didn't realize it then, but I just met my husband.
Oh, I love that.
So crazy. So he was always on the Kansas side in the public school system.
Okay.
And Nolan and I went to a private school, so we never intersected.
Yeah.
Turned out Nimish lived within like 2 miles of my home.
Okay.
Craziness. We were probably walking down the same grocery store aisles.
Invisible
just, like,
string
completely
theory.
orbiting each other for years without actually meeting. And it wasn't like he sat down next to me one day at math camp, and I freaked out. I like got up and I moved because I was like, he's so much smarter than I am.
Oh.
Like, I don't want him to think I'm dumb just because I'm a little bit slower to get these problems done.
Was he offended that you got up and sat somewhere else? Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know that until like we actually were like dating.
Yeah. That's so funny.
So a year later, we like met at a talent show that we were both performing at, and I realized that this guy could dance.
Oh,
like he was breakdancing, he could break
so
rhythm,
exciting.
and he could do Bhangra, he could do Bollywood. So I was like really, really impressed. I was like, okay, this guy's smart,
jack of all trades,
and like he does all these things. And all of us kids all went to Applebee's because that's the thing to do in the Midwest. Nothing else is open. So we all went to go out to eat at Applebee's afterwards. Like all my like dance friends from growing up were there. He and all of his friends were there, and we finally got to like talk and get to know each other. And then we became friends on Facebook, and we just never stopped talking.
Wow.
I actually never told my parents this is my boyfriend. It still hasn't come up yet.
That's so adorable.
We've been married now almost 5 years.
Wow.
But I think like one of the things that made him and I like the right people for each other was truthfully just that we were both like, I really wanted to be with somebody that was well-rounded because I spent so much of my life prioritizing like doing different activities and really trying to become the best version of myself. And he aligned on that completely. And then I always wanted somebody that was like ambitious and motivated because like when it comes to survival,
yes,
like no matter what life throws at you, like if you are at least a little bit ambitious and motivated, you will find a way to survive and push your way through it.
Absolutely.
And so I knew that through hardship, like this was going to be an important person. Was I trying to meet my husband at 15? No. Did it happen? Yeah.
That's incredible.
There was just this crazy gut feeling that I had about like 6 or 7 months into getting to know him, and I just couldn't ever shake that gut feeling for the rest of my life. It was like, this is somebody that I want in my life in any capacity that he'll have me.
Yeah.
And I think that like we don't really have a lot of like common interests. Like I feel like I got him into fashion. Now he's maybe more into it than I am. That man is always finding really cool brands and stuff like that. But I mean,
Wait, I
it's
love
not like
that.
we share like a ton of common interests. Like he likes cocktail making. I don't drink.
Okay.
Like,
Oh, wait,
like
you don't? That's so
no,
cool.
I don't. I think that like, you know, we've never really had the same group of friends. We've never gone to the same school. It doesn't really like those kinds of things don't really matter.
Sometimes it's nice because you can complement one another
Yeah.
as opposed to being a mirror of each other.
Right.
So
And
I think
sometimes
it's a
like we
beautiful
don't
thing.
even like the same kind of travel. Like he's willing to go camping and go on like a
Oh,
van through like, you know, natural
that's not me.
parks. That's not me either.
Yeah.
But
I
like
was
you
gonna
don't
say.
have to like have all these things. You don't have to eat the same foods. Like he likes cheese. I don't like cheese.
Yeah.
Like you don't have to have any of these things that I think a lot of people think like help with the foundation of a relationship.
I think in the modern day, a lot of people get caught up on aligning on these like more surface level attributes.
Yeah.
And I think what really matters is kind of what you've been saying is it's like the grit, the resilience, the values, the worldview. And I think a lot of that gets lost.
It's like what is important to you truly in a person.
Exactly.
Think about that and then find a person that matches that. Don't let distance get in the way.
I
Don't
think
let
distance
a
is
red
actually
flag get in
a
the
good
way.
a good thing to go through.
Yeah,
as
it
a
forces
couple.
you to communicate actually. Like
Yeah.
through those 7.5 years that we were long distance, we were really forced to like talk,
Yeah.
type, like video call. Like really like Skype was on trend back then. Like it was becoming a thing.
Yeah.
And we spent a lot of days on Skype just like learning about each other's days. And even if it seems like it's boring, like it's kind of fun to know.
Yeah.
Like what their day was like. Oh, like what time did you wake up? What did you do? What are you doing right now? Like, do you have a snack? Like, it's just like all these little things like build your understanding of a person, and that's bonding.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what you need later in life, so that way it's not all a mystery.
So one question I have is how did you guys manage to grow together? Because I think that this is the trend I noticed.
Yeah.
So when you are with your high school sweetheart, right? Either you grow in different directions and you break up, or in most couples, it's not apply to you. I feel that a lot of people that end up with their high school sweethearts in the long run end up being very complacent in life because they
Yeah.
end up kind of just getting so comfortable with each other at such an early age. And that's fine. They're happy. That's fine.
Yeah.
But this is very rare. I'm witnessing you in a relationship that started when you were in high school
Yep.
and has carried you through adulthood, but you guys both evolved so rapidly. And I'm just
Yeah.
so amazed at the fact that you guys went in the same direction. I think about the person I was when I was 15. If
Oh,
I had
gosh,
picked my
yeah.
husband at the age of 15, I would be miserable right now.
Yeah.
I would be so unhappy. I would hate my life. Seriously.
Yeah.
I'd be so unwell.
It's so true.
So it's like, how did you, I can't
And
even
we were
fathom that.
completely different people. Like when he was like going out with the guys and like drinking and stuff like that, I certainly was not.
Yeah.
You know, like we had very different lives. But I think like what the beauty of our relationship is we've never held each other back. We support each other 100% in like whatever
Yeah.
the other wants to do. And I think we've found a lot of comfort in knowing that there's somebody that's cheering you on.
That's huge.
So I think that's been a big thing for us. Like we always know that no matter what the day brings, there's somebody that like cares about you. And I know that sounds so simple.
No,
but
no,
it kind
it's
of is
it's
simple,
everything.
You
Yeah.
know, it's simple, but that's all you need in life.
Yeah.
And we've never wanted to hold each other back, which is why we were long distance for so long. We never wanted to resent each other.
Of course.
And we always communicate on everything. And I know communication is such a buzzword, but when I say communicate, I mean we tell each other the good, the bad, the ugly in the immediate. We don't wait. If there's something that he says that rubs me wrong, I'm telling him immediately in
Yeah.
a calm, cool, collected, as nice as possible way.
Of course, you want to
Like,
be respectful.
Hey,
to your
like
friend.
I really like I love you. You know that I love you. I care about you if you know you're not that
Yeah.
deep into a relationship, but something you said kind of like rubbed me wrong, and here's why it rubbed me wrong. And
Yeah.
it's him being willing to adapt what he said, understand what he did, and to be able to take that and change it for next time and
Yeah.
want to be better.
Yeah.
And the same goes the other way around. Like sometimes he'll be like, that was so mean.
Yeah.
I'll be like, oh no, like I didn't mean it that way for sure. Like let's like recap and rewind this moment. And if something bad happens to either one of us, we tell each other right away because there's never going to be a right time
Of
to
course.
tell somebody bad news.
Yep.
If something good happens, right away.
Yeah.
We don't waste time because when you waste time and you delay these conversations, you're delaying your own growth.
I completely
And so
agree.
I think like the rapidness of like both of our evolution together and side by side, and also like equally like successful in both of what we want to be doing in life and how we each individually measure success is due to like we just don't delay anything. We
Yeah.
hash it out right then and there. We don't go to bed upset with each other. If we don't feel very confident in the other and our relationship and where it's at, we hash it out before bed.
Good.
Always.
You get good sleep too that way.
Yeah, exactly. Otherwise, I'll wake up with a nightmare, I'm sure.
Yeah. Do you feel like there were moments in your relationship, you definitely don't have to go into detail, but do you feel like there were moments where it was a make or break and you both actively came together and decided that we're going to make this work?
I do think so, actually. Like, we realize that, like, what we have is really special. Like, just those key foundations and values, like, all these other things don't really matter. We don't need to have, like, the same friends. Our friend groups, when they meet each other, they don't need to get along. Like, we don't need that. What we need to be is to be aligned on, like, the same page. And we were all not always on the same timelines either, right? Like, there's never a right or wrong time to get married. We chose to do it at our 10-year. People are like, oh, well, I want to get married right now. I want to be married then, or I want to have kids on this timeline. I think, like, try to, like, not think about that for a hot second.
That's my biggest personality flaw, what you just said right now.
Just try to find the person that is really going to help you become a better version of yourself through all ages. And I think, like, whenever people do finally find that person and they find the person that they want to be with, like, I get so emotional because I just get so excited. Like, that's such a big deal. Like,
it's beautiful.
For them, they found their nimish, you know?
Yeah, they found their nimish. I love that.
Like, I love that for them. That makes me happy.
That's so beautiful.
A red flag is not a red flag. You can completely remove that flag. You can repaint that flag. Like, don't feel like a red flag is a red flag. Like, if that person, other than that red flag, seems fine and great and good and dandy, try to help them work through that red flag and see how they respond to it.
Yeah.
Tell them that it's a red flag. Tell them why and see how they react to that. And if they react to it positively and really want to better themselves to be a better partner, then that's a green flag. Yeah. They might not know it's a red flag. They might not know it's a yellow flag. You have to give somebody that chance.
Yeah, I think people do deserve grace, I think, for sure. And if they have an opportunity to be made aware of something and have the opportunity to self-correct, I think that's always welcome. It's difficult. I think in Gen Z especially, I've seen a lot of situations where sometimes it depends on the person. I would say it depends on the person, because like you said, if they respond well and they're willing to, come up with kind of like an actionable sort of next step and they can overcome it, that's beautiful. I think what happens is, and this is not at all what you're implying, I think what's difficult as somebody that's single in their 20s, I can tell you, it's like sometimes you meet people that just, even if they're aware, they just refuse to self-correct.
Yes.
And that's
like
the part.
This is the problem. And so, like, if the person is like that, then, like, maybe it does have to be a one-to-one perfect match. Yeah. Or perhaps maybe in 10 years that person will have evolved on their own based on, like, different experiences that have shaped them, and maybe they'll be a better partner. Yeah. For you or for somebody else down the road. So I think it does come down to, like, timeline and, like, personal growth. I think Nimish and I were, like, born out of the womb maybe a little bit more mature. Yeah. Like, I feel like I grew up, like, very responsible. I helped take care of my brother, who's, like, 6 years younger than me. My mom always says that, like, when she had a miscarriage, I was the one that, like, rescued her when she was, like, when I was 3. Yeah. Like, I was the one that, like, ran and got help and stuff like that. She's like, I don't know how you did that as a toddler, but I think I grew up responsible. Yeah. And I think Nimish had the same thing because his brother has the same age difference. Like, our brothers are the same age. They were both born in 98.
Honestly, it's really inspiring to hear of a healthy, long-lasting love. It's two people that are so accomplished, again, in their own worlds, that come together to each other at the end of the day. I mean, I think for me, like, it's kind of like taboo to talk about this because obviously everybody wants to be that, like, fierce, independent woman. And I am those things, I swear.
You definitely are.
Thank you. But at the same time, it's like, sometimes you just want somebody to celebrate those wins with. Sometimes you do these amazing things outside in the city and you come home and you're like, I'm coming home to an empty apartment. And that's okay. And it's okay. It's part of life. It's actually really nice to feel. It's thank you. And it's a nice feeling. But then there's moments where I'm like, it would just be nice to share in this moment with somebody. That's all. Yeah. It's about partnership. It's not about, I want a boyfriend. No, it's like, I want a lifelong companion to do life with. That's
what marriage is.
And I want to support somebody in their endeavors as much as I want somebody to support me in mine. I want it to be a two-way street. Right. I want to be there for someone. Yeah. Anyways, the point is
build something together.
Exactly. Like, build a life together. Yeah. Oh, I want kids. Oh, I want so many kids. And I just can't wait for that part of my life to start. But I know it'll all happen in due time,
at the right time, based on
the way that it's meant to. Yeah, I agree. Before we wrap up, in the midst of all the noise in this world, what is one message you want to send to the viewers?
So I have a personal life mission that I live by wholeheartedly, and it's been my bio on Instagram since 2015, and it's wherever you go, bring sparkle. And I
love
think like
that.
that, just that notion of bringing a little bit of positivity or trying to like have that feeling in you
Yeah.
goes such a long way. It's what's gotten me to where I am today. And I just hope that maybe it inspires somebody to be a little more positive.
I love that. Thank you for opening up about so many topics and so much depth.
Oh my gosh, thank you for having me.
It has truly been such an
Girl
honor
crush
and a
major.
pleasure. I know. I feel like my girl crush fantasies are coming true right now. I'm so happy that we're here. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Mwah. Thank you all so much for tuning in. And that's all for today. Tune in next Sunday for another episode. And I'm your talk show host, Sandalina Satar, signing off.